Hello, Bremer County and all of Iowa. I'm Dr. Sean Allebrook, and I'm a cancer scientist, biochem professor, and House District 57 candidate.
And I'm Dr. Emily Bavers. I'm a physician, mom of 3, and a health advocate. So, Sean, Sine Day for the Iowa legislature occurred over the weekend. They carried 12 days over the 100 that are allocated and engaged in a 40-hour marathon to close on Sunday evening.
You know, Emily, it's hard to think that straight and clearly without getting a little delirious with that long a time.
Gosh.
You know, a thing or two about being awake for long stretches, doing your job as a OBGYN.
Right.
What do you think about how they wrapped it up?
Well, I would say it's not really the greatest for sound decision making to be awake for 40 hours and debating during that time. Not great for safety or just rational thinking, but alas, the Iowa legislature Iowa legislature. What else to say?
You know, on that note, let's look at the headline issue from the legislative promise as far as this legislative session is, involved property tax reform.
Right.
You know, in the end, the legislature came together on a bill that passed after we talked about hours of debate.
Right.
And it's important to note the bill had bipartisan support in the end in the Senate, and the bill does several things to provide tax relief. And importantly, the past property tax revision doesn't kick in until fiscal year 2027. So the legislature has some time to possibly fix any mistakes.
Yeah. Well,
We'll
one of the things it does is it raises the tax credit for elderly or disabled Iowans from $1,000 to $1,500. It also changes the homestead tax credit to an exception and raises the amount covered to adjust for inflation. So currently it's up to $20,000 or 10% of a home's taxable value. But rather than a reduction of that on the tax bill, it's a reduction on the taxable value of the home.
Yeah, I mostly understand all that. One of the things that, for real, I do, but it's like, come on.
I had to Google it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where they were like, oh, we're going to make this property tax more understandable and simpler. That did not happen. So if there's one takeaway, it is as complicated as ever. Tax exemptions, tax credit, that's just a hard thing. So one of the things it does do is it changes the classification of multi-residential properties to be separate from residential properties. Now that's a key item for the Republicans. They wanted to see that happen. And then once that was separated, they can increase property tax rates for those multi-residential properties, the apartments, to 6% over the coming 3 years. I know we're both concerned this is going to mean higher rents for renters.
Right. It's punishing non-property owners, essentially.
Yeah.
Importantly and also curiously, it transfers some state assets from SAVE funding meant to go toward school infrastructure projects to go toward property tax relief instead. As a person whose kids are in public school and cares deeply about public education, ouch.
Yeah, it really makes it hard to do some of the infrastructure work we want. We count on SAVE and Pebble to get a lot of work done. They're running this $1 billion deficit, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to fund this property tax revision. And honestly, it's like they're opening up cupboards, just looking for places where they can grab any bits of money to try to pay for this. And you know what's suffering? It's going to be on the backs of the counties, and it's going to be the public schools and the cities and the municipalities and, well, all of us with services. Right. It's a terrible thing. Yeah, along the lines of education, it lowers the state's uniform levy on school foundation property tax from $5.4 per thousand to $5 per thousand. And now that limits the funding of schools unless the state aid backfills that. And they promise that they can backfill those things. But honestly,
that's a tough promise for a state running $1 billion deficit.
So, and it's not like they haven't reneged on promises in the past. Right. The legislature, they have. So the bill also caps local government revenue growth to 2% annually, though there are exceptions. And what did I say about complicated? The exception list is involved, and going through it, in the end, I'm still worried about counties and cities, municipalities having enough funds to being able to adjust their budget to meet the needs for public safety and some of the services that we all count on. So there is a cost to this property tax savings that we're going to experience.
Absolutely, there's a cost. You know, Sean, the bill is expected to save Iowans $350 million just next year in their property taxes.
That's a big number.
And over $4 billion over the next 6 years. And we've talked a lot about the financial picture in Iowa right now and in the future, and how the state has already begun moving money from the relief funds to vital programs that the state needs. How on earth will we make up for this loss in property tax revenue?
Well, we just mentioned some of these cuts, you know, moving money from SAVE and limiting growth. You know, regressive taxes are a thing, and when you talk about regressive taxes, you're talking about fuel and sales tax. When these taxes are paid by everyone, they are keenly felt the most by those who could least afford to pay, and that's the lower income Iowans. So we're going to see that as the state moves forward and tries to function and pay their light bill, our light bill, we're going to see, I think, more regressive taxes pop up, and we already have this last legislative session.
Well, and in addition to reducing the tax rate for property tax, the legislature has mounted a ballot constitutional amendment aiming to codify rules for both individual and corporate income tax rates in Iowa in the future.
Right, and you know, this constitutional amendment, if passed by Iowans this upcoming November, the result of that would mean that future legislatures will have to have a 2/3 majority in order to raise taxes. And, you know, that is going to be handcuffing as far as the ability of future legislators to deal with anything that Iowa has in front of them as far as budget balancing or the money to run the programs that we all count on.
It certainly would require bipartisan support, which has not been something that's been very present.
Yeah, exactly.
It was pointed out by Representative Converse during the debate on this bill, Senate Joint Resolution 11, which I will note happened during the 30th hour of this 40-hour session between Saturday to Sunday, that there's no similar limitation on other tax increases and no similar requirement to have a 2/3 majority for using money, for example, from like the Taxpayer Relief Fund, which the legislature has been using to backfill other cuts and fund Iowans' vital programs.
Okay, what are we going to do, especially if that ballot measure passes? When the Taxpayer Relief Fund runs out, our schools aren't funded, we can't pay for state health care, our hospitals are closing, and they are closing, our water is contaminated, we have work to do, and our government is too divided to increase the corporate tax rate. Instead of dealing with the deficit, they want to make it the new normal, having one. This amendment, if passed, will unnecessarily handcuff future legislators' ability to balance future budgets. Ugh, what a mess.
So true. Until next time, be well, Iowa.